2011, and this is to refresh everybody's memory about what's going on here at the border. 2011, we have an influx of children coming across the border, and what they're called unaccompanied migrant children, or no, unaccompanied alien children at the time. Yeah, unaccompanied alien children, UACs, because they've changed the name of them over the years to make it more politically correct.
I thought it was just
So
unaccompanied minors. So that's what they changed it to
no,
to
no,
make it.
no. They've changed it to everything. Probably now it is unaccompanied migrant, unaccompanied minors who went to unaccompanied migrant children. I mean, it's been everything. Really, I think they do it just so they could hide what's actually going on here. Hey, listen, I'm retired now, so I can speak my mind. So, as you guys know, 23 years federal government, a lot of that time spent within DHS. And one of my assignments back in 2009 through 2016 was working with Immigration and Customs Enforcement under the enforcement and removal operations. And in that capacity, I was a supervisor. Then I moved over to headquarters where I was a staff officer. And at that time, I was also the acting unit chief for quite a long time, where I actually was acting unit chief over 26 field offices. So within that time, I get assigned to the DHS human smuggling cell, and we're tasked under the White House Security Council to stop this crisis at the border. We were supposed to be at the strategic level to really hammer in what was going on with the unaccompanied alien children. So what happened was in about 2011 is when the influx really started happening. At the border, little kids, unaccompanied little kids, up through teenagers. Yes, there were some MS-13 intermingled in there acting as teens, but a lot of thousands of unaccompanied children. And hey, you know what, Chris, you and I and Ian, you're going to be there soon. You might even have one. But kids,
No,
kids,
not
we all
anytime
have,
soon.
we have children. So we know what it's like. Can you imagine your little kid,
Yeah.
two, three babies getting shuffled across that border? So a kid comes up to the border, and a lot of times they're brought in by smugglers, and they might have a phone number written on their clothing, or some sort of contact information written on their somewhere on them. So an adult, not necessarily a familial relation in the United States, will get this kid when they come through the custody system. We're going to go through that right now. So in 2011, thousands of kids starting and coming across the border. With politics, it's easy. They're like, hey, you know what? Send these kids come across the border. Some families are trying to get their kids here because they're already here present without admission or parole from an immigration officer. So they can't just go back down south and grab a kid, bring them north because they're here illegally. So the kids are coming across the border, right? They come to the border. They either go to a port of entry where they'll get being encountered by an officer, or they'll get encountered by a U.S. Border Patrol agent outside of the ports of entry. Now, when they come into the custody of one of these people from CBP, one of the agents or officers, they will then go into ICE custody, Immigration and Customs Enforcement custody, who will then hand them over to Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement, who will then hand them over to a contracted facility. So HHS will contract companies to handle their migrant children. Now, there's a timeline in all of this. The kids have to get into custody. They have to get over to HHS. HHS has to get them to a sponsor, and the sponsor facility will needs to get them out the door because you can't keep them in custody that long. There's not enough space. And plus, the politics at the time and throughout the years. So these kids are coming across the border. There are thousands and thousands. And I would like to say, I don't know what the current statistics are, but think that 2011 to now, there has to be over 1 million of them.
Oh yeah, well over.
A
Yeah.
million
I mean, if you look
plus.
at the statistics of how many people are coming over the border, I mean, it's multiplied by God knows how many,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Well, think about it this way. These kids are coming across with adults. And back in the day, before it became they really when Trump came into office the first time, they started hammering adults for bringing kids over there and acting like they were a family. And that's a whole nother, we could do a whole show into that whole thing because that's another story. But anyway, these kids go in these sponsor facilities and they get released to a sponsor. Now there's different levels of sponsors. Now you got familial relations, which is great. You have a father, someone who's a direct father, mother, someone who's a direct lineage to that child. And hey, how can we do that? DNA tells us. And plus, there's other ways to figure it out as well. And then you have familial relations. You'll have people that are friends of the family, and then you'll have other adult sponsors. And what I found out when I was with this human smuggling cell back in 2015, and there was 13 of us. What I found out is that DHS said, hey, you know what? We need to really take a look at what's going on with these sponsors. They're not getting vetted. The sponsors were not getting fingerprinted. They were not having their criminal histories run, nothing. They're pretty much just handing these kids over to anybody. So DHS says, hey, you know what? Let's run a sampling. So they run a sampling of 29,000 sponsors, and 3,400 plus came back with criminal records. And that could be a criminal record like reentry after deportation, but there were sex offenders and murderers in there. So the reason they weren't doing it is, for one, it was an election year, it was 2015. And two, it's like, hey, you know what? These people aren't going to let us take their fingerprints or everything, because a majority of them, I would say almost, I'd say a lot of them, I'm not going to go into this. Okay, let's say over 90% are here present without admission or parole. So they're not going to get vetted. Nobody was vetting these sponsors. Kids are getting released to criminals. I blow the whistle in 2015. I got the spreadsheet. I said, I go to whistle. My career was over at that point. We've already been through that story. But now here's what happened. 2016, I went to Senator Grassley's office. Actually, I went to them before that. And under Trump, they changed everything, man. They were fingerprinting. They were doing rapid DNA. They were monitoring where these kids are at. And it got good. So lo and behold, Trump, he's out of the office, right? Biden comes in, and within months, and I say I believe, they stopped vetting. And you could Google it, and I shouldn't say Google, but you could find the verified old documents that they stopped vetting the sponsors. No more fingerprints. And hey, you know what? Because the border has exploded since then, man. Hundreds of thousands of more kids coming across the border. And now, when a kid goes to a sponsor facility, ICE, HHS, anybody with a competent authority is supposed to monitor where that child has ended up. And you're finding out that kids are ending up, and this is bona fide, ending up within sex trafficking and within labor trafficking organizations. I shouldn't say organizations, but they're out there. They're getting trafficked. Every day these kids are getting trafficked.
Like syndicates, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
They are crime syndicates.
Oh man,
Wow.
when they were doing the accompanied children, and I write about this stuff in Town Hall, and believe me, I've been blowing it up since then. And the past few months, I've been blowing up articles over there. So if you go over to Jason Pickle on Town Hall, you'll see. I'm like, look, Trump needs to come in office, and he nips the bud on day one. Because
But
what's
has
happening?
that's what I was wondering. Has he had any like correspondence with you or people like you to say like, hey, we need to get back to what you were
Hey,
doing?
bro, I emailed everybody, man.
Yeah.
I said, look, I'm retired now. Bring me back, put me back in the game.
What do you think? Because is Grassley still around in Iowa? He's always
Yeah.
been I mean, that guy, living in Nebraska, growing up in Nebraska, Grassley was always a fighter. He always,
solid, man, solid.
He was, and he still was. So, but he's
Yeah,
he's like
still
100. He's like 180 now, dude.
He's
right?
probably at least 116.
No, but he's still a bad. No, the dude. That's one of the Congress. I don't have a lot of respect for many Congress people at all, but he was one I always had. And I've spoken at events where he's been at those events.
Yeah.
Joni Ernst has been at some of them, but he was. I love that guy. I would think that he would say, hey, bring this dude back on, because people listen to Chuck Grassley.
We'll get into that in a minute. But there's so much going on with this stuff, man, that it's just.
See, there's Grassley right there. He's hitting up right there.
Oh yeah, right there on my map. Hey, you know what? He helped me out, man, because I mean, we can get into this in a second. Let me write a little note because I want to get into the SIAs. But hey, kids are still coming across, still getting lost. I mean, they're absolutely lost. I think they said they lost track of 300,000 of them.
Yeah.
Or 30,000? I think it's over 300,000.
No, it was six figures. Whatever article. I mean, that was a big deal.
Yeah, but anyway, there was also the issue that, and this is why they had to start doing DNA, because accompanied children would come across with adults, and the adults would get a bona fide passport from down south that would show that this kid is theirs. So they would have the passports. But then when they started doing DNA, they're like, hey, dude, that kid's not yours. They were doing the rapid DNA, and the people were like, oh, well, at this point, you can get, convicted. You can get, prosecuted. So now and then what happened? So they would use these kids, and I wrote about this too. They would use these kids, bring them across the border, and then send them right back down south to be used again. They're recycling kids to get adults across the border.
Whoa. Wow.
Well, let's backtrack. DeSantis people try to nip this thing in the bud. So I think it was about 2 years ago now. I went down. Yeah, you're not supposed to talk about. One of the attorneys was like, "Hey, you're really not supposed to talk about grand jury." But hey, listen, I went down and testified in Florida about the grand jury for the grand jury, and we talked about the kids. And for about 3 or 4 hours, I sat there and I told them the whole process, man. And they showed, well, I don't know. Listen, there are videos. I'm not going to say they showed me, but there are videos of them selling kids down south. I mean, it made me sick. And I'm thinking they're selling kids here now. These and man, listen. We know the real world. I mean, you guys absolutely know the real world. They are selling children for sex. It's industrialized sex, and people, sick people out there, evil people are raping these children at a wholesale level right now. So what I did is, a few months ago, I was like, I just, I get through these waves where I'm like, I just can't deal with this shit.
Yeah.
Excuse my French. So I wrote a whole bunch of letters, House, Homeland, everyone. And I said, here's my comprehensive guide. And I came up with a plan. I said, okay, this is how we could do this by vetting the sponsors, by doing DNA. Every sponsor that comes in there should be placed under what they used to do under ICE to monitor criminal aliens and people who are getting ready to go to court is alternatives to detention, i.e. GPS. We could contract that crap out. Listen, we're sending $45-50 billion overseas. Throw $30-40 million into monitoring every sponsor, either through GPS or some other tracking method. The children have to go to an immigration court. They're put into the immigration system. They're issued a notice to appear, meaning they have to go and see a judge. So what we should do is have them report to the local ICE office. They go to the ICE office with their sponsor brings them in there, and they verify the health and safety of that child. While they're at it, they update their vetting of these sponsors. So every sponsor needs to be vetted, they need to be fingerprinted, and they need to be monitored. They need to be brought into an ICE office, or hey, you know what? You don't want to do an ICE office? You come up with some sort of law enforcement agency connected to the US government or a contracted agency that could run criminal history checks and knows what questions to ask them. Make sure that when they come in, that they aren't re-offending or they haven't offended since the last time they came in. It's not that hard because we know, if nobody has ever been encountered by law enforcement or the IC here or abroad, then they are not going to show up in any vetting. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Is I've sent all these things. So one of the congressmen that I reached out to said, "Hey," the day after I sent all these letters out, they said, "Hey, come on in." I go down to Congress, and at the time it's funny because I was a contracted firearms instructor, FI, for the Capitol Police for 6 months. So I took the day off, got a suit, went down, met with a congressman with his staff, and I laid out this plan. And at the time, I'm like, they're not listening, are they? Two attorneys. And I'm like, they're just going through the head. So you know what they told me? They said, hey, look, and this is where political capital comes in. They go, oh, that's nice, but what we really want you to do is to recruit whistleblowers. We want you to go out and find people in the government to come forward and talk to us. And I'm thinking to myself, so everything what you really want me to do is go out there and do your job for you.
Yeah.
And sell becoming a whistleblower. And me as a whistleblower, I didn't get anything positive out of this. There was no big lawsuits with lots of cash. And the only thing I got was my career was Stanley. So I'm like, so you don't care about anything about fixing a process. You want political capital because it looks great when you put a whistleblower on a stand. It looks absolutely amazing with the desk. You can come up with, pictures and all that. So that's where that's at. So yeah, bro, you asked about the kids and there's my.
It's just unbelievable because it seems like to me, and I'm just a simple man, but bringing the kids in and you're having this sponsor come in, you've got the perpetrator right there, right there. You killed two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
The kid, got the kid, and guess what? I'm catching the criminal at the same time. I have to go through more screenings just to. Well, shit, Amy, what's the last screening I had to go through just to check into a hotel? It's like, dude, you're just handing the kid over because familial relation. No.
The guy comes in with and it's probably not, and they're probably coming in with sedulous, like a Mexican form of.
Exactly.
Here's a kid.
Right
hey, you want a kid? Hey, we got a sale. And and you know what killed me the most, man, when I blew the whistle was I was the only one from our little area there that had access to the UAC database. So I could look and see little pictures of these kids. And I'm like, man, And
That's some sick shit though. With people, why would you? I know I've been around enough to know that people are sick.
yeah,
A lot
bro.
of people, but it's just you're right. Do you want to fix it, or do you want? No, let's fix it. There's a real easy fix. We can fix it right now. You have to do your jobs,
Yeah.
but
And you know what? Well, here's the deal is like, I've been a contractor since I retired. Shit, bro, you were a contractor.
yeah,
Why can't we just put together? Listen, I talk to my buddies all the time because we're all about that age. We're all like in our 50s now and we
hey,
retired.
contract us out. We'll make
Contract it
back.
out, man.
Hey man, we
How
got it.
how many retired LEOs are there right now in retired military? What about all these? You have such a massive amount of resources out there
Yeah,
that you could put a contract together and say, hey, you know what? We are going to do monitoring of these children and we're going to do recovery. If we can't find them, we're going to recover them. And hey, by the way, recovery doesn't have to be like, oh, we're going to go knock down doors. No, recovery is we're going to do surveillance and
yeah.
we're going to find out where it is. And then we're going to call ICE and ICE is going to go over and get the person, or we're going to call the locals. Because, hey, look, how many go to not USA Jobs, but go to LinkedIn, go to Indeed, go to anywhere and look up background investigator jobs and how many of them are out there. Why
Well,
can't
yeah.
why can't we just contract this out? We contract everything else out.
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I mean, with the new president coming in, with Trump coming in, I don't have an answer. That's what we need to do. Hey, President Trump, that's what we need to do, bud.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple fix. Do you want to do it, or I agree with you. Do you want to continue to gain political capital by putting it on C-SPAN and Fox and then the big because that drives
And
drives
you
the
know what?
funds to the political parties.
Let's get a little bit off the rails here. Let's flush the U.S. government. Let us get rid of all of these career SESs
Yeah,
and all these career people that have been there through the administrations playing the game. They play the political game. They are politicians. I don't care if they are catching a G. They're making their 200 something $1,000 with bonuses as a federal employee for 20, 30, 40 years.
yeah, yeah.
Flush the government. It's
I agree.
time. I mean,
So do you think this will be like what you're talking about right now? Do you think this will be a priority for Trump? Because it's like he comes into office. We have the issue in California right now. That's going to be a major priority, along with a lot of other things, just securing the border itself. One of my favorite issues, opening up the Bitcoin strategic reserve, which I do honestly hope they do. But do you think this will be like, hey, first 100 days, let's fix this unvetted sponsor issue?
let me look at one of my town hall articles. Actually, you know what, bro? I love writing for them because they publish it. Listen, I've written stuff for Newsweek and everywhere else, and you know who actually just published an article about this whole thing was like the Catholic Church has it like a paper, and they're like because the Catholic Charities is another big thing. It's kind of
Which I'm surprised by because I will say one thing, I don't know if I'm going to get accused of being like anti-Catholic or something. Half my family's Catholic, but whenever the Pope gets involved in the immigration debate, they're very like open borders. The Pope is very much just like, oh, let them all come in.
okay. Here's what I wrote November 9th, 2024, and this is when I was writing letters all to Congress and everybody. No, it was actually before that. Trump won day one, protected children, America's lost migrant children crisis. I said on day one, President Trump must take immediate action to protect migrant children by completely overhauling the Office of Refugee Resettlement within the Department of Health and Human Services. The current catastrophe has resulted in thousands upon thousands of children vanishing into the unknown, many into the hands of traffickers.
But do you think he
350,000.
will? Do you think he will?
He has to. There is
Okay.
no thinking. And you know what? Listen, man, you want to play politics all day long, but if he learned anything from the first go around was that he needs to put trusted people in there. He
Yeah,
did. You know what? He did put this guy in charge of ICE. Listen, the previous ICE administrator, acting deputy, I don't even know. They come up with these terms because it's political. The last one was Patrick Leckletter, and him, PJ, and I were classmates. Good dude. The new one coming in that Trump wants is Caleb Vitello. Now, Caleb is solid from what I understand because I talked to a lot of people around him. I didn't take this as firsthand knowledge because I never met the guy. But from what it sounds like is he's solid. They pulled him up through a lot of he was a field agent, field officer. He did a lot of stuff in the field. He's ran the NFTTU, National Firearms Tracking, fugitive operations. He knows what he's doing. But Caleb, needs to bring in a good crew. Because remember, a lot of these people that were in power have been in power since even before Trump won. You know, Trump admin won. So he needs a flush. He needs to get a good crew of people around him. I know a lot of retired, annuitants. I would gladly go work for them, but they need to fix that whole system, because the problem is ICE is HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, and Enforcement Removal Operations. HSI does the investigations into these trafficking networks, but they also do child porn cases. They do all of the, human trafficking cases. They do the investigations. ERO is supposed to deal with the alien crisis. And someone needs to go in there and just make sure that they're not pulling HSI to go out here and just, shuffle bodies at the border. They need these two agencies separate.
Thanks for checking out Battle Line Podcast. This is just a smaller clip from our latest episode, which you can check out in its entirety by clicking here. While you're watching, be sure to hit the subscribe button and thumbs up the video to show your support. Now, if you'd really like to help us out, click the thanks button below to make a donation. It goes directly to us in keeping Battle Line Podcast going for you.